About 4 years ago, I was walking alone near Pratt Beach on a beautiful summer evening at about 10 p.m. It was so quiet and peaceful. I decided to move from the bike trail and walk to the end of the pier and climb up to the lighthouse to look at the full moon, city skyline, and waves. I was thinking about how serene it all was and sat there for a little while. The pier is also known as Kettle's Pier. I climbed down and saw that there was a group of 8 to 10 teens who had seen me walk there and followed me, waiting for me in silence, and began to surround me. Nothing and nobody was around. My heart sank. How fucking stupid I was. They started getting closer, laughing, saying how they would throw me into the lake and nobody would ever know what happened to me. They were right. There was no escape. At the end of that pier, I was completely at their mercy. It was still early in the season, and if I jumped in, I would likely drown after hitting the water from shock. I had to beg for my life and pull out all the stops. I gave them everything I had. Finally, one of them decided to rough me up and began punching me. They kept saying how I was going to die that night. Finally, it seemed someone was approaching on the distant trail, and they all saw it and bailed. I hid in the wild grass for about 30 minutes, and then ran home, collapsed, and sobbed. My partner insisted I call the police when I finally came home, but I resisted because I was in shock. A cop came to my apartment, and I was scolded for being in the park after hours. Of course, nobody was ever caught. However, I saw in the news that someone was murdered by being thrown in the lake only 2 weeks prior, close to where I was. I agree what I did was foolish, but now I truly understand how lucky I was not to be another statistic that night. Please don't walk alone near the beach at night, no matter how beautiful it is.
About 5 years ago, I was recently divorced and living alone in a one-bedroom apartment in downtown Chicago. The place was clean and the rent was decent. One of those places that had a doorman. I felt safe here. I was alone and loving it, focused on my career and not on my clingy ex-husband. Things were finally looking up for me. At the time, I was working pretty late at the office and would often stumble into my apartment sleep-deprived in the early hours of the morning and wake up by 6:30, 7-ish, to start the day. I started noticing that in the morning my door would be unlocked sometimes. I usually dismissed this as my sleep-dead brain, thinking that the bed looked more appealing than locking the door. Another thing that I noticed since moving in was that I seemed to misplace things more than I used to. Little things like a hairbrush or nail polish, that sort of thing. It wasn't really that big of a deal, just enough to be a slight annoyance in my day. The longer I lived there, the more frequently I seemed to forget to lock the door. At first it was every once in a while, then it seemed like an almost daily occurrence. More things went missing, things like pictures, shaving razors, and most disturbingly, my underwear. This went on for long enough that I started to get a little paranoid. I started to take the time at night to make sure the door was locked. I got into a habit of every night after I locked the door to turn the handle 3 times and say to myself, "It's locked, it's locked, it's locked." Time after time I would wake up and the door would be unlocked. One time I even tried staying up all night to watch the door, but I ended up falling asleep in my chair. I decided that my mind was not reliable enough to stay up all night, so I invested in a video camera. I went all out and bought the fanciest camera that I could get my hands on. So one night I set the camera up facing the door. I hid the camera under a pile of towels on the floor. I locked the door and went to bed. When I woke up, my apartment looked normal. Nothing is missing that I could see. I decided to check the tape. I fast-forwarded through hours of footage, not seeing anything. I was just about to give up when I noticed the handle of the door jitter. Then it slowly crept open. A figure slid through the half-open door and walked towards the camera. It paused. looked around as if it was listening for something, then walked forward into direct view of the camera. I paused the camera, and the hairs on my arms and the back of my neck started to rise. I was staring directly into the face of the maintenance man of the building. I could see those big, thick glasses and curly hair. I had no doubt who it was. I played the tape a little more. He looked comfortable as he walked around the apartment. Then he turned and walked towards my bedroom and out of the view of the camera. I didn't know what to do. Sobbing, I called the police. I tried to explain over the phone but couldn't. Soon enough, 2 officers arrived at my doorstep. I told them everything and showed them the tape. I remember seeing the blood drain from their faces. They promised me that I was safe and that they were going to get this guy. I needed to lie down, but didn't want to be alone. One of the officers offered to stand outside my apartment door as I took a nap. As I was lying in bed, unable to sleep but too drained to move, something kept nagging at me. I lay there for a few minutes, tossing and turning, unable to get comfortable or rest. My mind was racing. Then a realization slowly washed over me and chilled me to the bone. We watched the tape and saw the man enter my home, but we never saw him leave. I froze and then started shaking. I needed to get to the front door. I sat up and looked around the room. I couldn't see anyone. I swung my legs over the side of the bed cautiously. My feet hit the cold wood floor, and I felt warm breath on my ankles. I raced out of my apartment as fast as I could and to the safety of the police officer. He called for backup. They found the man under my bed, clutching a knife and a Polaroid camera. They caught the man, but it scarred me for life. I had to get out of there. I packed my bags and said to myself never to go back to that apartment again.
When I was 16, a few years ago, my parents went out for the day, and my sister left to hang out with friends. We live in a small suburban neighborhood near Rockford, Illinois. It was just me and my dog at home, and I was pretty bored. It was really hot in the living room, so I turned on the air conditioner. To do that, I needed to open the garage door since the back of the air conditioner faces the garage, and it gets overheated in there. Usually, we lock the door that leads from the garage into the living room, but this time, I forgot. A few hours later in the afternoon, my dog started barking like crazy. I almost ignored it, but then I heard the doorknob on the garage door jiggling. I thought my sister had come back, so I yelled, "It's not locked!" But she didn't respond. The doorknob kept jiggling, more violently this time. I walked over to the door, ready to yell again. "It's not locked!" When the door opened. It felt like slow motion. The door creaked open just a sliver, and I saw huge, dark brown hiking boots. Definitely not my sister's. Panic hit me hard. I pushed on the door to close it, screaming and crying hysterically. I'm small, but I managed to push it shut and lock it. The guy started pounding on the door, but then he stopped. Still crying and shaking, I grabbed my dog and ran to the kitchen to get a knife. Then, I heard the backyard gate open and quick footsteps on the cement path. Just like in a horror movie, with tears streaming down my face, I screamed, "No!" Dog in one hand and knife in the other, I ran to lock the back door. My legs were shaking so badly that when I bent down to pick up the knife I had dropped, they gave out and I nearly fell on my face. I scrambled to my feet but ended up crawling and tripping on the kitchen floor, accidentally cutting my foot with the knife. I hid under the dining room table, praying and holding my mouth to cover my sobs. My heart was pounding as I heard footsteps approach the back door. I saw his shadow through the blinds as he looked inside. He stood there for what felt like forever, then finally walked away. The police never found him. Now, I always make sure the door's locked when the garage door is open. If my dog hadn't barked, I would have been in my room, completely unaware until it was too late.
I hope you found these stories as chilling and unsettling as I did. It's a stark reminder that sometimes reality can be stranger and more frightening than fiction. If you enjoyed these tales of suspense, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more spine-chilling content. This is your host, Nicholas Black. Until next time.